We continue on in our series of presentations on the Catechism's teaching of the sacrament of matrimony. We continue today with marriage in God's plan, the subsections on marriage under sin and marriage under the law. We now discuss marriage under the regime of sin. Everyone experiences evil within themselves and without, and this is especially acute in human relationships, especially marriage. Um, because of original sin, within marriage, we see discord, domination, infidelity, jealousy, hatred, separation. And all of these vary to some degree between times in human relationships and cultures throughout the history of man. Nevertheless, despite the varying degrees in which man has been able to overcome or not be burdened by some of these consequences of sin, the disorder of sin is universal to all human relationships and especially to marriages and across times and cultures. But what we have to understand is that the marital disorder that we see is an effect of sin, and it is not part of the nature of either man and woman in themselves or man and woman together. It's not part of the nature of the relationship. It was never intended to be that way. It is an effect of sin. It's an effect of the original sin. In fact, it's one of the first results of original sin in the Genesis 3. That mutual attraction that God gave to Adam and Eve is changed into a relationship of domination and lust. That is also a prediction in Genesis 3. In addition to that, the vocation to be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth is bound up within the kind of marriage act, the marriage between man and woman. Now, that is burdened by the consequences of pain in childbearing and the toil of labor, whereby we work only through the sweat of our brow. Well, we have to understand that this is all because of sin. Well, sin needs to be remedied through grace, forgiveness. If that's the case, then the way to heal marriage is grace. The grace of the forgiveness of sins, of remedy of sin, of virtue is needed to achieve the fulfillment of marriage. Now, next in salvation history is the law, the Mosaic law specifically. How do we see marriage develop under the Mosaic law? We can think of it as a beginning to remedy and heal. First of all, the consequences of original sin can also be seen as remedies. So the idea of pain in childbearing or having to toil and labor by the sweat of our brow, those are not only just punishments or consequences, they are remedies. By still embracing marriage, even though it comes with those consequences, it can be penitential. It can work to overcome our self absorption, our ego, the constant pursuit of our own pleasure, and that opens ourselves up to give ourselves to the other, to mutual aid and to self-giving and and mutual understanding. Even though the law never explicitly rejected things like polygamy or actually allowed for divorce, it did so to avoid arbitrary domination of women. In the law, even though you had these exceptions, there is developing underneath in the rabbinical traditions the understanding that marriage has an inherent unity and is indissoluble, even though the law allowed for exceptional cases and typically did so for to avoid the arbitrary domination of a patriarchal and an angry and hateful man simply being domineering over a woman, allowing the woman to get out of that. But it's mostly the prophets that present God's covenant with Israel as an image of faithful married love. Often God is the faithful bridegroom, and it's always Israel who is the unfaithful harlot that goes off and rejects God. Ruth and Tobit are also books which witness an elevated sense of marriage, fidelity, and tenderness within that marriage. And then it's finally the Song of Solomon, which is a unique expression of human love within the marital context, which prepares for an understanding of marriage under Christ in its fullness of unity and indissolubility.